Reproduction process in the flower involves two steps. First one is the pollination, second one is the fertilization. Now what is pollination exactly? How many types of pollination are there and how the process goes on, that we are going to discuss now. Now first of all, what is pollination? Pollination is just transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of a flower. Now what happens in this case? What happens in this case is the pollen grains which are present on the anther, they are transferred from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Stigma is a sticky part. Because of that, when the pollen grains transfers from the anther to the stigma, they easily stick there. Now, what happens? How this process goes on? Just by some agents. Agents here are basically can be wind, some animals, some insects, which do the pollination process. As the pollen grains are sticky in nature, they stick to these agents. And when the agent from the anther goes to the stigma, they from their body, they sticks on the stigma, and then the further process of fertilization takes place. So this is the very much, or we can say that the first step of seed formation. The types of pollination are two, that is self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now what is self-pollination and what is cross-pollination? The name itself says that. So let's understand that. Self-pollination. Self-pollination means the pollination takes place in the flower itself. That is, the pollen grain transferred from the anther to the stigma of same flower. Like this, in the image you can see that when the pollen grains from the anther goes and sticks to the stigma of the same flower, and since this process is going into the same flower or occurring into the same flower, and because of that this process is known as self-pollination. Now the word itself says pollination. What is pollination? That is transfer of pollen grains. And from where it is going to take place? From anther to the stigma. And again the further process goes on, that is fertilization, that we are going to discuss in our further slides. Now the second one is cross-pollination. Now the cross itself says from one flower to the another flower. Now in this case what happens? The pollination occurs from one flower, from anther of one flower, or we can say that the pollen grains from anther of one flower transfer to the stigma of another flower. But the most important thing in this case is the flower, both the flowers from where the pollen grains are transferring and on which the pollen grain is transferring, they need to be of same species. Then only the further process will goes on. Otherwise, if the flower are of different species, then the pollination will occur, but the further process, which is fertilization, that is the fusion, or we can say that the formation of zygote, won't take place in that case if the plants are of not same species. Right, so that is how the pollination is occur.